One cold rainy night an unexpected bond forms between an affluent recluse and a destitute father with a fragile newborn. When generosity exposes a buried secret, both men learn fate works in unimaginable ways. Marcus Allington was the type of billionaire most people only read about in glossy magazines. His towering skyscrapers and philanthropic accolades defined his public image, yet behind the grandeur lay a man disillusioned by life's hollow victories. The lavish penthouse he returned to each evening echoed with emptiness, a silent reminder that wealth could never compensate for the companionship he lacked. His charitable foundations were an effort to absolve a lingering guilt he felt over a troubled upbringing, but they offered only fleeting solace. As the rain pelted against his floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus stared into the city below, consumed by thoughts of how loneliness could exist even in the midst of so much opulence. Several miles away, Harvey Brooks clutched his tiny daughter, Daisy, to his chest beneath a makeshift cardboard shelter. Each drop of rain seeping through signified another struggle in a life already brimming with hardship. Harvey had once been a diligent worker, filled with pride for providing for his family, until a series of devastating events left him jobless and homeless. The last semblance of hope he clung to was the bright-eyed infant in his arms whose very survival depended on Harvey's unfaltering determination. He refused surrender. In a city known for its relentless pace, both Marcus and Harvey were trapped by forces they could not control. Marcus had grown accustomed to hearing insincere flattery from board members and business partners, each vying for a favor or partnership. Yet, true companionship eluded him, as he felt no one genuinely cared for the man behind the fortune. Meanwhile, Harvey's world had dwindled to a tattered backpack of essentials and the desperation to shield his baby girl from the bitter cold. Society often looked past them, as if a father and child in distress were invisible in the urban din. On the night their paths would intersect, the rain battered the streets relentlessly, and the thunder rolled with an unsettling rumble. Traffic slowed to a crawl, while pedestrians hurried beneath umbrellas. Marcus was returning from another extravagant gala, feeling numb to the glitz and forced smiles. Harvey, on the other hand, sat shaking at the entrance of an abandoned storefront, feeling Daisy's shallow breaths tremble against his chest. Fate, it seemed, was orchestrating a moment where two lives, one defined by abundance and the other by unbearable scarcity, would converge in the most unexpected way. Neither man knew what awaited them. The collision of their worlds happened just past midnight, as Marcus's sleek town car inched through flooded intersections. When he spotted a figure huddling beneath a broken awning, he felt a jolt of recognition in the man's desperate eyes. Marcus instructed his driver to pull over, and for a moment he simply watched the tattered coat shielding a frail infant from the relentless downpour. Memories of his own youth, nights spent frightened and alone, surfaced unbidden, compelling him to act. He stepped out into the torrent, water quickly soaking his tailored suit, to approach the shivering pair. Harvey barely registered the sophisticated man looming above him until he heard an offer of help. Uncertain whether to trust a stranger's kindness, he nonetheless followed Marcus into the warmth of the town car. Daisy, too cold and weak to cry, nestled in Harvey's arms like a fragile porcelain doll. The tension was palpable. Two men from vastly different walks of life, united only by circumstance. Marcus couldn't ignore the pang in his chest as he glimpsed the baby's tiny fist wrapped in her father's coat. The fleeting image stirred a sense of responsibility in him, an urgency he hadn't felt in years. Inside the car's plush interior, Harvey tried to calm Daisy's labored breathing. Marcus quietly observed them, recalling his own mother's unwavering devotion during times of hardship. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to be truly vulnerable, to rely on another person for survival. The storm outside felt symbolic, mirroring the emotional turmoil within each man's heart. Though neither spoke openly about their histories, both sensed that this encounter was more than a random act of compassion. It was a turning point. Marcus made a swift decision, instructing his driver to head directly to his estate. He couldn't bear the thought of dropping Harvey and Daisy at a mere shelter. Unbeknownst to Harvey, the estate was not merely a luxurious mansion. It was also Marcus's fortress of solitude, a space rarely breached by outsiders. Yet tonight it would serve as a haven. Arriving at the ornate gates, Harvey's eyes widened. He had never witnessed such opulence. A million questions buzzed in his head. Why was this stranger helping him? What would happen once they stepped inside? Still, he clutched Daisy to his chest, bracing himself for whatever awaited them, clinging to the hope that, at last, they had found a temporary reprieve. Marcus Allington's sprawling estate was a sight most could only imagine. Framed by towering hedges and intricate iron gates, it featured a long, winding driveway leading to a mansion of gleaming white stone. The structure stood as both a monument to Marcus's success and a silent testament to his self-imposed isolation. When the car pulled beneath a grand portico, Harvey Brooks stepped out slowly, clutching Daisy in his arms, still unsure whether he was stepping into salvation or further uncertainty. Rainwater pooled at his feet as he gazed at the illuminated windows stretching across the estate's facade. It felt impossible to reconcile the reality of his own destitution with the opulence now before him. Marcus watched the awe flicker in Harvey's expression and felt a pang of conflicted pride. He rarely brought visitors here, especially strangers. But something about the baby's fragile form and the desperation in Harvey's eyes had stirred a memory he could not ignore. That memory transported him back to his childhood, where he had once been the one looking to adults for reassurance and security. Standing there in the downpour, Marcus knew he had to help, if only to quiet the ghosts of his past. A tall woman in a crisp uniform appeared at the door. Her name was Ms. Gabriella, the head caretaker who managed the estate's daily operations. A stoic figure with silver hair neatly pinned back, she rarely questioned Marcus's decisions, but the unexpected arrival of a homeless father and infant gave her pause. She offered a polite nod, gesturing them inside. The marble floors glistened under the foyer's chandelier, reflecting both Harvey's ragged shoes and Marcus's soaked tailored suit. Harvey felt overwhelmed. He timidly shifted Daisy's weight and tried to recall the last time they had been inside a warm, clean space. Despite the exhaustion pressing on his shoulders, he felt an urgent need to remain vigilant. He had learned through harsh experience that kindness could sometimes be laced with ulterior motives. Yet, in this moment, he had little choice but to trust Marcus, who guided him past the grand staircase and into a quiet sitting room. The air was perfumed with fresh flowers, a stark contrast to the damp, grimy streets they had just left. Ms. Gabriella returned with towels and a soft blanket. Harvey thanked her under his breath, wrapping Daisy carefully. Though the baby still didn't cry, her eyes fluttered open, showing a fleeting spark of life that made Marcus's heart clench. He remembered being equally powerless long ago, a child caught in the crossfire of his parents' bitter divorce. Money had only come into his life much later, and even then, it hadn't cured the loneliness rooted in those early years. Now, seeing Harvey and Daisy in such a precarious state forced him to confront those memories with fresh eyes. While Ms. Gabriella fussed over the thermostat, adjusting the temperature to ensure the baby's comfort, Marcus quietly excused himself, stepping into a side corridor. There he closed his eyes, flashes of his own difficult upbringing rushing back. He recalled the nights he slept on a relative's couch after his mother lost her job, the mornings he went to school without a packed lunch. Years later, when he finally built his empire from a tech startup, he vowed never to let anyone see the vulnerable boy he once was. But observing Harvey's plight awakened in him an unsettling sense of responsibility, both paternal and fraternal. When Marcus returned, he found Harvey rocking Daisy gently, as though each small motion might ward off the harshness of the world. Ms. Gabriella stood nearby, her stoic demeanor softened by obvious concern. For the first time, Marcus noticed how tired Harvey truly looked. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes clung damply to his thin frame. Marcus cleared his throat. the weight of what he was about to do almost making him hesitate. He reached for a set of keys resting on a nearby table, keys he always kept at the ready, symbols of doors he usually kept locked to everyone else. In that silent, charged moment, Marcus resolved to open those doors, both literally and figuratively. The choice felt both terrifying and necessary, and he couldn't fully explain why. Perhaps, he thought, genuine empathy requires risk. Perhaps opening a door to a stranger is sometimes the only way to truly face one's own fears. In the hours that followed, Marcus arranged for a guest room so Harvey and Daisy could rest. Ms. Gabriella, though initially reserved, sprang into action once she realized the baby's precarious health. Fresh linens were laid out on an ornate four-poster bed, and a crib, once stored away in an attic, was carefully assembled. Despite the mansion's cavernous size, the hallway leading to the guest wing felt suddenly narrow, as if the gravity of the situation had compressed the space. Every step echoed with the tension of two strangers forced by circumstance into an intimate coexistence. Harvey glanced at every detail, from the hand-painted wallpaper to the polished brass doorknobs. He wondered what kind of man lived in such abundance yet seemed equally weighed down by loneliness. After Daisy was safely tucked into the crib, he finally allowed himself a moment of respite on the edge of the bed. The warmth of the blankets and the soft lighting felt surreal, like stepping into a dream after so many nights on the street. Even so, gratitude warred with anxiety in his chest. He had a child to protect, and he knew better than to assume generosity came without strings attached. Sensing Harvey's wariness, Marcus decided to offer something akin to reassurance. Through the half-open door, he spoke in a measured tone, explaining that he wanted them to stay as long as necessary and that immediate medical care was already being arranged. There was no direct dialogue, just a quiet narrative of him clarifying resources. A private doctor on call, nutritious meals prepared by the mansion's chef, and a promise that neither father nor child would return to the streets anytime soon. Still, the mansion's corridors, lined with artwork and shimmering chandeliers, seemed to heighten the contrast between host and guest, wealth and want, power and vulnerability. That night, Marcus slept little. He found himself pacing one of the many sitting rooms, lost in thought as the storm outside continued to hammer the windows. Occasional lightning illuminated the ornate portraits on the walls, including a small painting of a boy with solemn eyes, Marcus himself at the age of 10. His mind drifted to the turning points in his own life. The day he received a scholarship to a prestigious university, the unexpected mentorship by a venture capitalist who saw potential in his early tech designs, and finally, the relentless ambition that drove him to transform every opportunity into a towering success. Yet for all that achievement, he could not shake the hollowness he felt. He owned multiple properties across continents, but he had never taken the time to fill them with genuine human connection. Harvey's arrival, unplanned and inconvenient, forced him to confront that truth in a way he hadn't anticipated. As he recalled the look in Daisy's tired eyes, he felt an unfamiliar tenderness take root in him. Meanwhile, in the guest room, Harvey struggled with his own memories. He had once been employed at a small hardware store, earning enough to rent a modest apartment. Life took a devastating turn when the store shut down unexpectedly, leaving him unemployed. Soon after, Daisy's mother fell ill and passed away, overwhelming medical bills draining what little savings remained. Harvey searched desperately for work, only to be met with rejection at every turn. The mounting pressures led to an eviction notice forcing him onto the streets with an infant cradled in his arms. The recollection of that downward spiral unsettled him deeply. He had done everything he could to stand firm against each new setback, but fate seemed cruelly determined to push him further into desperation. Now, in the sanctuary of Marcus's estate, he wrestled with conflicting emotions, profound relief and an unrelenting fear that this peace might be snatched away at any moment. Yet, as he looked at Daisy, bundled snugly in the crib, he felt a fleeting optimism. For once, she was safe, warm, and protected from the storm's relentless fury. Hours passed and dawn broke over the estate, revealing dew-kissed gardens and a calm sky. The rain-soaked roads beyond the gates bore little evidence of the previous night's deluge, but inside the mansion, the aftermath of one encounter was only beginning to shape new destinies. Marcus emerged from his restless night with a resolution to better understand the man and child he had taken in. And for Harvey, waking to the sunlit expanse of a billionaire's home felt both surreal and tenuously hopeful, as if maybe, just maybe, fortune had finally granted him a moment of reprieve. Morning light filtered through tall windows, revealing the estate's meticulously landscaped gardens. The previous night's rain had given way to a delicate mist that clung to rose bushes and marble statues. Inside the mansion, Harvey Brooks awoke disoriented, but more rested than he had felt in months. Daisy stirred softly, eyes flickering open as if to confirm this strange new environment. Despite the plush surroundings, Harvey's instincts urged him to remain guarded. He was, after all, still a guest in a billionaire's fortress, a reality that felt both surreal and tenuous. Meanwhile, Marcus Allington stood at the far end of a second-story balcony, watching the sunrise tinge the sky with pastel hues. Sleep had been elusive, but he found a calm focus in the morning silence. From his vantage point, he saw a reflection of himself in the large window, a man of power, success, and unimaginable resources. Yet, beneath the polished surface, he recognized the same vulnerability he had seen in Harvey's eyes. It weighed on him like an unspoken secret, tied to the memory of a painful childhood. If not for a few moments of serendipity, he too might have been lost to life's cruelties. Drawn out of his reverie, Marcus recalled that a trusted friend and advisor, Dr. Adeline Hayes, was scheduled to arrive. Having been the estate's on-call physician for years, Dr. Hayes knew both Marcus and the staff well. She was also one of the few people with an inkling of his guarded past. Marcus intended for her to examine Daisy, ensuring the baby was healthy and addressing any latent concerns. He wanted to leave nothing to chance. The recollection of Daisy's frailty the night before, her small body chilled to the bone, still unnerved him. Down in the kitchen, Ms. Gabriella prepared a simple breakfast for Harvey: hot oatmeal, fresh fruit, and a pot of tea. She remained composed, but couldn't entirely hide her curiosity. The staff rarely witnessed Marcus extending himself so personally, let alone inviting strangers to reside under his roof. As she carried a tray to the guest room, her footsteps resonated through corridors lined with oil paintings of distant relatives and philanthropic events. The mansion, despite its grandeur, had always felt more like a museum than a home. When Harvey opened the door, Ms. Gabriella offered a reserved smile, placing the tray on a side table near a window. She gestured politely to indicate that Daisy's well-being was paramount, and that Dr. Hayes would arrive soon to help. Though Harvey had no reason to mistrust her, he couldn't quell the lingering anxiety that clung to him. Every sense felt heightened, as if an invisible threat could surface at any moment. Still, he thanked her in hushed tones, internally debating whether he could truly let his guard down in this peculiar haven. A short time later, Dr. Hayes arrived. She was a poised woman in her 50s, her kind demeanor tempered by the professionalism of a medical expert who had seen both privilege and poverty throughout her career. While she examined Daisy, she noted signs of mild dehydration and the overall toll of harsh living conditions on the baby's tiny frame. She commended Harvey for doing everything possible to keep Daisy safe under such dire circumstances. The narrative of her reassurance floated through the quiet hallways, underscoring the stark reality that Daisy had narrowly escaped the dangers of life on the street. Standing at a discreet distance, Marcus listened with a mixture of relief and concern. The doctor's assessment confirmed the gravity of the situation, but also offered hope that Daisy would recover with proper care and stability. On an unspoken impulse, Marcus decided he wanted to do more than just provide a night's shelter. He was beginning to realize that helping Harvey and Daisy wasn't merely an act of philanthropy. It was an emotional reckoning with his own past, a chance to confront the painful vulnerability he had carefully buried under years of calculated composure. By mid-morning, Dr. Hayes concluded her visit, and Harvey felt a momentary wave of gratitude. Daisy was given essential nutrients and the promise of follow-up care, which made the uncertain future feel slightly more secure. In the adjacent hallway, Marcus offered a subtle nod toward the doctor, wordlessly conveying his thanks. Though his features remained outwardly controlled, an internal shift was already underway. Taking in the sight of Harvey cradling Daisy with renewed hope, Marcus felt an unexpected warmth, a sensation akin to a crack forming in the protective shell he had constructed around himself. As the day progressed, the estate's usually serene atmosphere hummed with a subdued tension, a current of possibility weaving its way through silent corridors. Ms. Gabriella returned to her usual routines, overseeing the cleaning staff and managing a never-ending list of household tasks. Yet her mind frequently drifted to the new arrivals. She recalled another time years ago when Marcus had shown concern for a young intern who collapsed from exhaustion during an intense work project. Back then, his reaction hinted at a deeper empathy, one rarely visible beneath his stoic facade. Now, with Harvey and Daisy, it appeared that compassion had resurfaced in an even more profound way. In the library, a cavernous room lined with shelves of leather-bound volumes, Marcus found Harvey tentatively exploring the space. Drawn by the warm lighting and the faint smell of parchment, Harvey had ventured in while Daisy napped. Gazing at the rows of literature, he felt a pang of regret over the college education he never finished. He once dreamed of achieving a stable life for his family, only to watch those aspirations crumble under financial strain and tragedy. Moving deeper into the library, he noticed framed photographs on a walnut desk. A younger Marcus, perhaps in his early 20s, standing beside another man who appeared older yet similar in appearance. It was a subtle glimpse into a history that Marcus rarely discussed. From the vantage point of the corridor, Marcus observed Harvey's interest in the photos. A flicker of unease passed over him, as those images were remnants of a chapter he kept meticulously private. Yet, instead of interrupting, he allowed Harvey a moment to see that the man of grand wealth also had a past, marked by complicated relationships and personal loss. Unbeknownst to Harvey, the older figure in the photo was Marcus's uncle, the man who had temporarily taken him in when his parents' tumultuous divorce left him effectively homeless. That uncle's support, though brief, had forever shaped Marcus's outlook on survival and self-reliance. A gentle knock from Ms. Gabriella in the hallway alerted them that lunch was prepared. Marcus, seizing the opportunity, gestured for Harvey to follow. As they traversed the long corridor, a sense of shared understanding formed, though neither spoke. Each sensed the other carried unhealed wounds. Harvey had lost a stable life, his wife, and nearly his hope. Marcus, on the other hand, had lost faith in genuine human connection. Yet here they were, two individuals linked by an improbable twist of fate, forced to acknowledge that vulnerability might be the starting point for true empathy. In the dining room, a smaller, sunlit alcove had been set with simple yet nourishing dishes, roasted vegetables, grilled chicken, and fresh bread. The understated meal was Ms. Gabriella's unspoken way of making Harvey feel less overwhelmed by opulence. Harvey ate in cautious gratitude, recalling how meager meals had been his norm for months. With Daisy still resting, he could, for the first time in a while, focus on his own nourishment. Every bite was a reminder that sustenance could be a bridge to hope, if only he found a way to make it last beyond these walls. While Harvey finished his meal, Marcus received a call in an adjacent room, business matters demanding his attention. The conversation carried undertones of urgency. Acquisitions, stock fluctuations, and a pending board meeting threatened to pull him away from his unexpected role as protector. He listened intently, offering short, definitive responses, but his gaze kept drifting toward the dining alcove where Harvey was quietly folding a linen napkin. In that moment, Marcus felt torn between two worlds: the high-stakes corporate realm he had meticulously built, and the fragile new reality that was unfolding within his own home. By late afternoon, the house settled into a reflective calm. Daisy awoke with a curious glimmer in her eyes, and Dr. Hayes's prescribed regimen seemed to be working. Marcus disappeared into his study, grappling with conflicting emotions about how deeply he should involve himself in Harvey and Daisy's future. Ms. Gabriella prepared the next round of care items, a soft blanket, baby formula, and a small collection of infant toys that had gathered dust in the attic. Harvey, glancing at those items, felt an overwhelming mixture of relief and guilt. He silently wondered if an abrupt end to this kindness lay just around the corner. Yet, despite the tension and unvoiced uncertainties, a subtle bond was emerging, a bond forged not by superficial gratitude, but by an unspoken recognition of shared vulnerability. As daylight began its gentle fade, Marcus stepped outside to the estate gardens, letting the crisp evening air clear his mind. He sensed that a pivotal moment was fast approaching, one that would test his willingness to truly invest in Harvey and Daisy's lives. In the fading light, he looked back at the mansion's windows, golden with the promise of warmth and shelter. At that instant, he could almost feel the flicker of a long-dormant need within him, the need to give, to protect, and perhaps to find redemption in doing so. A few days passed in a precarious sort of peace. With the storm gone and Daisy's health stabilizing, the estate's usual tranquility masked the undercurrents of worry threading through everyone's thoughts. Marcus Allington threw himself into coordinating care for Harvey Brooks and his infant daughter, ensuring the doctor's follow-up visits remained prompt. Despite his efforts, tension buzzed beneath his polished exterior. He found himself grappling with old wounds, memories of disappointment and betrayal that he had once promised never to confront again. Harvey, for his part, sensed the unease within Marcus, even though he could not pinpoint its source. When they occasionally crossed paths in the hallways, the air felt charged, as if they both skirted a conversation neither knew how to begin. Harvey grew restless. Being surrounded by unimaginable luxury while contributing nothing troubled him. Though appreciative, he felt the gravitational pull of self-doubt. How long could this sanctuary last? Could a man as guarded as Marcus truly be offering genuine, unconditional help? One afternoon, Dr. Adeline Hayes arrived for Daisy's checkup. She marveled at the baby's progress, noting that Daisy's cheeks now held the faintest tinge of healthy color. While Harvey watched Dr. Hayes jot down her notes, he couldn't help reflecting on the bizarre turn his life had taken. Only a week earlier, he was shielding his daughter from the elements beneath a cardboard box. Now he walked polished floors and observed a bustling household staff as they attended to his child's needs. The dichotomy overwhelmed him. After Dr. Hayes left, Harvey wandered the mansion's upper corridors, searching for a moment of solitude to quiet the questions swirling in his mind. He passed rows of locked doors, each rumored to lead to rooms brimming with relics from Marcus's distant past. Eventually, he discovered a narrow staircase spiraling up toward an attic room. Instinct led him to climb, compelled by a mixture of curiosity and a wish to understand the man who had come to his aid so unexpectedly. The attic offered a stark contrast to the rest of the estate. Dust motes floated in beams of light coming through a small round window, and an assortment of old trunks and storage crates lined the walls. Harvey noticed a stack of framed photographs resting against one corner, partially obscured by a canvas sheet. Most depicted scenes of ceremonies, corporate events, and philanthropic galas bearing the Allington name. But a few pictures stood out for their intimacy, images of a younger Marcus beside a woman with a kind smile, and a man who looked strikingly like Marcus, just older and wearier. The expressions on their faces suggested closeness, possibly family. As Harvey rummaged through the photographs, a battered cardboard box marked "Personal Effects" drew his attention. Inside, he found what appeared to be letters, diaries, and legal documents. He knew he had no right to pry, yet something propelled him to look. The topmost envelope bore the same last name as Marcus, Allington, but the return address was unfamiliar. Before he could read further, a floorboard creaked behind him. He spun around, heart pounding, to see Marcus standing in the doorway, an unreadable expression etched across his face. Marcus's gaze flicked from Harvey to the open box, and in that single moment, a collision of emotions seemed to spark. The billionaire looked equal parts betrayed, startled, and deeply unsettled. Harvey tried to stammer out an apology, but the tension in the attic felt suffocating. Instead of fury, though, what emanated from Marcus was something more complicated, fear perhaps, or sorrow he had worked hard to repress. In that flash of discomfort, they both realized that a silent boundary had been crossed. The once shielded corners of Marcus's life were now exposed, and Harvey, who only sought understanding, had inadvertently forced that door open. In the charged stillness of the attic, Marcus and Harvey stood as if suspended in time. The dusty air thickened with an unspoken standoff, Harvey clutching the box of personal papers and Marcus staring with the intensity of someone confronted by his own suppressed memories. A strained moment passed before Marcus finally broke the silence, not with words, but by stepping forward and gently lifting the papers from Harvey's hands. Though no dialogue was exchanged, the message was clear. This corner of Marcus's world was off limits, and Harvey had trespassed. Yet as Marcus shuffled the photographs and letters back into the box, an old document slipped free. Its edges yellowed by age. It bore a date from nearly 2 decades prior. Marcus froze, recognition flickering in his eyes. Even from a few feet away, Harvey could discern the large official seal at the top of the page. It appeared to be some sort of guardianship or adoption-related form. Marcus's shoulders slumped, a vulnerability he rarely displayed. He gathered the papers hastily, turned to Harvey, and then motioned for them both to leave. They descended the attic stairs in a tense silence. Once they reached the hallway, Marcus paused, pressing a hand to the ornate banister. The corridors, usually echoing with quiet elegance, now felt claustrophobic. Although outwardly composed, he was clearly wrestling with the emotional weight of whatever he had just seen. Harvey hovered uncertainly nearby, uncertain how to apologize or whether he even should. He had gone too far, yet he also sensed that this confrontation might be the catalyst Marcus needed to confront his long-standing pain. Before any further interaction could unfold, Ms. Gabriella appeared at the end of the corridor. She hurried toward them, carrying Daisy in her arms. Concern radiated from her posture, and Harvey immediately noticed Daisy's unusual fussiness. The baby's face was flushed, and she whimpered with a raspy cry that betrayed her discomfort. Alarmed, Harvey rushed forward, gently taking Daisy from the caretaker's arms. Ms. Gabriella explained in hushed tones that Daisy's fever had spiked unexpectedly. Instantly, Marcus's internal turmoil shifted to protective urgency. He guided Harvey and Daisy to a nearby sitting room where Dr. Hayes had left a medical kit for emergencies. While Ms. Gabriella fetched cool compresses, Marcus searched for a digital thermometer. The tension of the attic discovery momentarily took a back seat to the immediate crisis of Daisy's sudden fever. Harvey held the baby close, feeling her small body radiate heat against his chest. As minutes crawled by, the fever showed no signs of abating. Dr. Hayes was summoned, her earlier departure reversed by a swift phone call. By the time she arrived, Daisy's breathing had grown shallow, each soft gasp echoing in the quiet room like a distress signal. The staff scrambled to accommodate Dr. Hayes's requests: sterile blankets, medical tools, a place to lay Daisy so she could be examined more thoroughly. Yet, despite everyone's frantic coordination, the baby's frailty was deeply concerning. Marcus hovered at the periphery, his eyes fixed on Daisy. A torrent of painful recollections surged within him. Times he'd felt completely powerless as a child, overshadowed by adults who made decisions about his future without truly seeing him. Now here he was, older, wealthier, and presumably in control, yet faced again with a sense of helplessness in the face of a child's suffering. The parallels unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Under Dr. Hayes's focused assessment, Daisy's temperature was confirmed to be alarmingly high, and immediate steps were taken to stabilize her. Cool cloths were placed on her forehead, and she was given mild medication suitable for infants. While Dr. Hayes worked, Ms. Gabriella stayed close, soothing Harvey with calm reassurance. For a moment, the estate's labyrinthine corridors hushed as if the entire household collectively held its breath, waiting to see if Daisy would pull through. Marcus found himself pacing by the window, staring out at the gardens he once took pride in. Now, the carefully trimmed hedges and pristine pathways felt trivial in comparison to the crisis unfolding inside. He sensed that if this fragile life slipped away under his roof, he would never forgive himself. That impulse, to shield Daisy from the harshness of an uncaring world, rekindled something inside him, a determination that overshadowed his usual restraint. Though the attic revelation still burned in his mind, the immediate priority was saving this tiny child whose well-being had unexpectedly come to mean so much. Dr. Hayes administered further care, and gradually Daisy's fever began to stabilize. The color in her cheeks, once worryingly pale, started to return in faint patches. A collective wave of relief passed through the household, but the emotional toll lingered. Harvey, visibly drained, placed Daisy gently in a crib that Ms. Gabriella wheeled into the sitting room, wanting to keep her under close observation. Now that Daisy was out of immediate danger, Marcus's pent-up anxiety gave way to a profound sense of responsibility and a renewed urgency to address the unspoken questions hovering between him and Harvey. As the household staff dispersed, Dr. Hayes pulled Marcus aside and advised him that while Daisy was improving, her immune system remained fragile. Further complications could arise unless she had a stable living environment. Implicitly, that meant more permanent arrangements would be necessary if Harvey and Daisy were to remain under Marcus's care. Dr. Hayes, well aware of Marcus's guarded nature, hoped that stepping up for this small family might help him confront his own unhealed wounds. She left him with a knowing look, one that hinted she believed this situation was bigger than mere charity. In the wake of Daisy's near crisis, Harvey felt both gratitude and shame. He had invaded Marcus's privacy in the attic, yet the billionaire had not used it as an excuse to cast him out. Instead, Marcus had rallied to ensure Daisy received immediate care. Unable to contain his emotions, Harvey retreated to a quiet corner of the library, shoulders trembling under the weight of relief. He thought of his late wife, who never got to see Daisy grow, and of how alone he had felt since her passing. But here, amidst ancient volumes and gilded furniture, he suddenly felt less alone, even if that solace came from a source he barely understood. Not long after, Marcus walked into the library, his demeanor pensive but not hostile. He approached Harvey with a nod, indicating he had something to share. Harvey, resigned to the fact that his intrusion upstairs might have triggered this confrontation, gathered his courage and gave Marcus his full attention. Though no words were spoken aloud, Marcus handed Harvey a single photograph from the attic, a younger Marcus standing beside a bespectacled attorney. Tucked behind it was the official-looking document Harvey had glimpsed earlier, confirming a legal guardianship arrangement that Marcus had once been part of. Harvey's eyes scanned the document piece by piece. Slowly, the narrative took shape. When Marcus was a minor, his mother had lost custody due to mental health struggles, and an uncle temporarily became his guardian. During that guardianship, Marcus's life had teetered between government assistance and the uncertain benevolence of distant relatives. Over time, thanks to a scholarship and a unique mentorship, Marcus rose above those hardships. Yet, the entire ordeal left him wary of ever depending on anyone again, forging the solitary path that defined him as an adult. That unspoken confession lingered in the still air. Harvey felt a twinge of empathy. He recognized the quiet terror of not knowing where one might sleep or find the next meal. He bowed his head, understanding that the attic was not just a storage space but a mausoleum of Marcus's most painful memories. The billionaire, so composed in every public setting, had built emotional barriers around these personal struggles. Now, a homeless father's desperation had cracked the walls open, revealing the softer, wounded core inside. Observing the shift in Harvey's expression, Marcus placed the photograph and document on a nearby table. The gesture communicated a fragile trust, an invitation to see him not as an untouchable figure of wealth, but as a survivor of a system that nearly broke him. In that moment, the two men stood on equal ground, neither overshadowed by the other's circumstances. Each understood that genuine empathy requires letting someone witness the vulnerabilities you most yearn to hide. Before either could fully process that moment of understanding, Ms. Gabriella appeared at the door. Her face was calm, yet urgent. Daisy, still recuperating, had begun to fuss again, the fever threatening to climb once more. This time Marcus and Harvey did not hesitate. Together they hurried back to the sitting room, the library's revelations urging them onward. Even as Daisy's cries reminded them of her fragile state, the bond between Marcus and Harvey had strengthened, fortified by the realization that neither man's suffering negated the other's. The mood in the sitting room was tense, but Dr. Hayes worked diligently, adjusting Daisy's medication and cooling her forehead. Marcus and Harvey stood side by side, united by worry and an unspoken promise to protect the tiny life that relied on them. The hush in the air underscored the gravity of what was happening. Two men from vastly different worlds, bound by a shared fragility they never intended to reveal. Outside, dusk settled over the estate gardens, painting the windows with a gentle twilight glow. Slowly, Daisy's cries diminished, each breath becoming more stable. Dr. Hayes gave an encouraging nod, indicating that while Daisy's condition was serious, there was a good chance she would pull through as long as they continued providing the right care. Harvey, tears lining the corners of his eyes, sank into a chair, his exhaustion overwhelming him. In the background, Ms. Gabriella quietly prepared a basin of fresh water and cooling cloths, her maternal instincts showing in subtle gestures. The crisis was not over, but it felt less hopeless. Marcus remained standing, arms folded tightly across his chest, as though bracing himself for a storm. Yet inside, he felt an unexpected serenity. For the first time, he was not alone in his troubles, or his concern for another human being. The vulnerability he saw in Harvey and Daisy echoed the child he once was, a boy in urgent need of help that rarely came. That resonance made him realize he had the resources to give them a far better chance than he ever had. The protective walls he'd erected around his life began to crumble, replaced by a feeling that perhaps sharing his space and his heart might be less terrifying than he had imagined. As Dr. Hayes finished her checks, the household staff resumed their routines, preparing supper and tidying rooms. Harvey, regaining composure, rose to his feet and apologized to Marcus for venturing into the attic. He spoke haltingly, his voice catching as he tried to explain that he was driven by the need to understand the man who had rescued him. Though Marcus did not verbally respond, his steady gaze and slight nod conveyed an unspoken acceptance. There would be more to discuss, but for now, they both recognized that empathy outweighed any trespass. Night enveloped the estate once more, the sky a tranquil navy blue scattered with stars. In a rare break from his duties, Marcus joined Harvey in the sitting room, neither one quite ready to leave Daisy's side. Ms. Gabriella brought in a tray with 2 mugs of tea, placing it on a nearby table. The warmth from the tea steamed upwards, softening the chilly air that seemed ever present in the large house. The pair sipped in a contemplative silence, each lost in thoughts of how drastically a single week had changed their lives. Harvey stole a glance at Marcus. He marveled at how easily the man could be misconstrued as aloof or unfeeling. After what he had seen in the attic, and after witnessing Marcus's unwavering concern for Daisy, he realized that behind the billionaire's reserve lay a depth of compassion, fueled by personal scars. In some strange way, their struggles aligned. One had battled an uncertain childhood that left him emotionally guarded, while the other fought daily to keep a tiny life alive. Hours later, the tension in Daisy's breathing eased once again, allowing Harvey to rest his eyes for a moment. Marcus quietly motioned for Ms. Gabriella to escort Harvey to a guest room, assuring him that staff would watch over Daisy through the night. Though Harvey hesitated, his weariness ultimately prevailed, and he offered a faint smile of gratitude. In the hallway, Ms. Gabriella guided him toward a comfortable bed, leaving Marcus behind. Left alone with Daisy, Marcus regarded the sleeping infant, her tiny fists occasionally twitching in fitful dreams. A wave of emotion swelled in him, as if the precariousness of her condition mirrored the precariousness of every human connection he had long avoided. Yet, strangely, he felt calmer than he had in years. Sometimes, life arranged circumstances so that a single, defining moment pulled back the curtain on guarded hearts. Tonight that curtain was irreversibly drawn. The fear that once governed Marcus's life had met a new force, the silent, undeniable call to do good, to care, and to let himself be seen. And in that quiet, lamplit room, the climax of two lives converged. A billionaire confronting his deepest regrets and a homeless father clinging to hope for his child. Their next steps, daunting as they might be, would no longer be faced alone. Daisy's fever scare left the entire household on edge, yet it also solidified an unspoken bond among its members. Over the next few days, Dr. Adeline Hayes visited regularly, ensuring Daisy's recovery remained on track. Each checkup brought cautious optimism, as the baby's fever gradually subsided, replaced by a healthy flush in her cheeks. Harvey Brooks, relieved beyond measure, found himself working alongside Ms. Gabriella, carefully learning how to feed and bathe Daisy under more stable conditions. He discovered that in a house of such grandeur, the smallest acts of care carried the greatest significance. Marcus Allington, still grappling with the emotions stirred by the attic confrontation, channeled his restlessness into quiet acts of support. He coordinated medical deliveries, upgraded the guest room to suit Daisy's needs, and arranged for additional household staff to ease Ms. Gabriella's workload. Amid these gestures, he remained guarded, observing from a distance as Harvey and Daisy forged tentative routines in a space that was never intended for guests to linger. Yet even as he maintained his emotional reserve, Marcus couldn't deny feeling an unfamiliar warmth whenever Daisy gripped his finger or whenever Harvey, exhausted but grateful, offered a silent smile of thanks. With Daisy's health stabilizing, Harvey began stepping outside the mansion for short walks in the extensive gardens. The carefully manicured hedges and ornate fountains felt surreal to someone whose recent memories involved sleeping under bridges and rummaging for essentials. Occasionally, Marcus would appear unannounced at the edge of a pathway, neither man quite sure how to navigate this new, awkward friendship. Their mutual concern for Daisy served as a bridge, allowing fleeting moments of connection when they least expected it. Meanwhile, Ms. Gabriella quietly watched the unfolding changes within the estate. She had seen Marcus bury himself in work and philanthropy projects for years, rarely engaging on a personal level. Now, with Harvey and Daisy in the picture, she observed subtle shifts. Marcus lingered over breakfast to check on Daisy's progress, or he'd pause to chat with Harvey about the day's weather. These small gestures hinted at a deeper transformation, one that Marcus himself might not fully acknowledge. While Dr. Hayes continued to monitor Daisy, Ms. Gabriella made it her mission to guide Harvey in building a sustainable routine for caring for an infant, a routine that could one day exist outside of Marcus's mansion. Emboldened by Daisy's recovery, Harvey grew determined to repay Marcus's kindness. He approached Ms. Gabriella, asking if there were any odd jobs he could perform around the estate. Although initially hesitant, aware of Marcus's penchant for privacy, she found small tasks to help Harvey regain a sense of dignity. Before long, Harvey was sweeping garden paths, assisting the kitchen staff with grocery inventories, and learning simple handyman tasks from the estate's maintenance crew. Each completed chore brought a spark of pride back into his eyes. During this time, Marcus juggled his corporate responsibilities with newfound personal obligations. Board meetings demanded his attention, and he spent hours on conference calls in his study. Yet, more often than not, he surfaced from these responsibilities to check on Daisy's naps or discuss Harvey's progress with Ms. Gabriella. What began as an act of charity was evolving into a genuine familial atmosphere, something Marcus had not experienced since his own youth. Although he kept his emotions tightly reined, each day in Harvey's and Daisy's company made it more difficult to deny the sense of belonging that had started to flourish under his roof. A turning point arrived when Dr. Hayes suggested that Daisy's overall health would be best served by continuing to live in a stable, supportive environment. Hearing this, Harvey's relief intermingled with trepidation. He longed for independence, yet he recognized his daughter's fragility. Broaching the topic with Marcus felt daunting, but fate intervened when Marcus himself approached Harvey one evening, standing under the warm glow of the mansion's chandeliers. Marcus revealed that he was in the process of launching a new philanthropic initiative, a transitional housing program designed to assist struggling individuals and families. He paused, clearly battling his own reservations, before quietly proposing that Harvey and Daisy remain on the estate as the program's pilot beneficiaries. Surprised, Harvey found himself momentarily speechless. Gratitude filled his chest, but so did a mixture of lingering pride and uncertainty about whether to accept such an offer. Ultimately, a glance at Daisy, who was peacefully dozing in Ms. Gabriella's arms, provided clarity. With a measured nod, he agreed to stay, setting into motion a plan that would challenge them both to confront what it meant to move forward without letting the past define them. Word of Marcus's new housing initiative quickly spread among his corporate circles and philanthropic contacts. Though he had funded countless charitable efforts in the past, this project felt more personal, an extension of his own story, rather than mere goodwill. He enlisted Dr. Hayes's expertise to develop guidelines ensuring families like Harvey's could transition from crisis to stability. He also sought Ms. Gabriella's input on day-to-day logistics, aware of her hands-on experience in managing a household that now brimmed with renewed purpose. Harvey, no longer just a passive recipient, stepped into an advisory role alongside Marcus. He offered first-hand insight into the realities of homelessness and underemployment, shaping the program's policies with genuine empathy. This collaboration forged an unlikely partnership. Over late-night discussions in Marcus's expansive study, the two men bonded over shared determination, Harvey fighting for dignity and security for his daughter, Marcus striving to atone for a youth marked by instability. As their mutual respect deepened, so did Marcus's understanding of how every life, no matter how fortunate or disadvantaged, can shift in an instant. A single event, a lost job, an unanticipated tragedy, could unravel even the most carefully constructed plans. Amid these transformations, the mansion itself came alive in ways it hadn't for years. Ms. Gabriella found herself coordinating small gatherings, staff potlucks, meetings for potential benefactors, and even toddler-friendly playdates for Daisy, who was quickly becoming the household's cherished focal point. For the first time, the estate resonated with laughter and conversation that felt genuinely warm, rather than obligatory. Harvey marveled at this evolution, recalling how silent and imposing the place had seemed when he first arrived, drenched and desperate. Daisy, meanwhile, thrived under the collective care. She transitioned from constant worry to curious exploration, toddling around with newfound confidence. Whenever she flashed a bright, toothless smile, Marcus felt a stirring in his chest, a reminder that by safeguarding another's future, he had begun to heal the wounds of his past. Observing Daisy's small victories, her first steps across a marble floor, her delighted giggle at a roaming cat, became a daily affirmation that progress, though slow, was very real. Outside the estate, construction began on the first official transitional housing facility, funded by Marcus's initiative. Harvey visited the site often, capturing photos to show Daisy later, intent on recording the journey from their darkest moments to a future lit by hope. As the housing initiative gained momentum, Marcus faced a moment of truth in his personal life. His board of directors questioned the drain on resources, and skeptical investors wondered if this philanthropic branch might weaken the company's financial standing. Yet Marcus, buoyed by the success of Daisy's recovery and Harvey's resilience, found a new clarity. This cause was worth championing, even if it came at a professional cost. Drawing on every ounce of his well-earned influence, he stood firm in shareholder meetings, articulating that ethical responsibility could go hand in hand with corporate success. Harvey watched these high-stakes negotiations unfold from the sidelines, alternately anxious and inspired. His respect for Marcus deepened as he witnessed the billionaire risking his polished reputation for a cause that not only impacted one small family, but also represented countless others facing similar hardships. This unwavering commitment reminded Harvey that real change required personal investment. It couldn't simply be outsourced or funded without emotional ties. Eventually, the board relented, swayed by Marcus's vision and the positive press surrounding the pilot program at the estate. That victory marked more than just a corporate milestone. It signaled that compassion, when backed by genuine resolve, could indeed reshape institutions as well as individual lives. In the weeks that followed, the mansion transformed into a symbol of new beginnings. Harvey and Daisy officially moved into a newly renovated guest suite, now more like a modest apartment than a lavish bedroom. Each day, Harvey found himself growing more hopeful. He dared to plan for a future that included Daisy attending a decent school, a future where he could offer advice to others caught in the same desperate straits he once endured. Marcus, in turn, continued to forge connections with community leaders, securing partnerships for his transitional housing project. The estate became a meeting ground, not merely a fortress of solitude. Catered luncheons and guided tours showcased real-life success stories with Harvey front and center, recounting his journey from the streets to a stable home. Daisy, perched on his hip, served as living proof that even the most vulnerable could flourish under the right conditions. As final details fell into place, both men realized their lives had irrevocably intertwined. What began as a rain-soaked encounter on a lonely street evolved into a shared mission. Marcus no longer felt haunted by emptiness, and Harvey finally believed in a tomorrow where survival wasn't the only goal. Together, they had ushered in a chapter of restoration, one that neither could have written alone. Marcus and Harvey's story reminds us that every act of compassion can spark a wave of change, even between strangers from vastly different worlds. What opportunities might you have to make a difference in someone's life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more heartfelt stories. Sometimes, a single moment of kindness can transform more lives than we ever imagined.